My daughter invited me from St. Lucia to Atlanta to meet my first grandchild. I spent my last savings on the ticket she promised to buy. For 9 hours I waited at the airport, a fool with a suitcase full of handmade baby blankets. She never showed up. She never even answered the phone. She thought I was just a sad old woman she could abandon when I was no longer useful. She forgot that the same hands that knitted those blankets also kept a ledger of every single dollar she ever borrowed. And the bill was about to come due. Before I begin, thank you for being here. For being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman finding her voice and reclaiming her dignity, you are in the right place. Please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It means the world to me. Now let me tell you what they did to me. My name is Veronique Laurent, and for 68 years, my life has been woven into the vibrant, sun-drenched fabric of St. Lucia. I am a retired seamstress. My hands, though now stiff with a touch of arthritis, spent 40 years turning fine fabrics into wedding gowns and Sunday bests for the people of my community. My small, tidy home in Castries, painted the color of a ripe mango, is my kingdom. It is a quiet life, a good life, centered on my church, my garden where the hibiscus blooms with a fierce, joyful red, and my deep, abiding and often painful love for my only child, my daughter Chloe. Chloe lives in Atlanta, a city I have only seen in pictures, a place of glass and concrete so far removed from the lush green of my island home that it feels like another planet. She left St. Lucia for university and never came back, swept up in the fast-paced promise of American life. She married a man named David, and they built a life that I only witnessed through brief, often stressful phone calls. The financial dynamic between us had long been a source of quiet pain for me. Chloe had a good job, she always said, but there was always an emergency, always a crisis that only my savings could solve. Just 3 months before the news came, I had received one such call. Chloe's voice was a frantic whisper, thick with manufactured tears. "Mummy, I am so sorry to ask," she'd begun, the familiar opening to a familiar script. "David and I found a new apartment, but the landlord needs the deposit by tomorrow and his paycheck is delayed. It's thousands of dollars. We'll be homeless." My heart, that foolish, tender organ, clenched with fear for her. I went to the bank the next morning and wired her a significant portion of my savings, money I had carefully put aside for a new roof. She had promised to pay me back in a month. The month came and went, and the money, like so many promises before it, never materialized. So when she called a few weeks later, her voice bright and breathless with joy, my first instinct was suspicion. But then she said the words, the magic words I had been waiting a lifetime to hear. "Mummy, I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." She was already several months along, she explained, and had just wanted to wait until everything was certain. In that single moment, all the financial anxieties, all the broken promises, all the quiet heartaches, they all dissolved like sugar in hot tea. A grandchild. A piece of my Chloe, a piece of me, a continuation of our line. The joy that flooded my heart was so pure, so absolute, it was a physical force. I wept with happiness, my neighbors hearing my cries and rushing over, thinking something was wrong, only to find me laughing through my tears. My life was instantly given a new, singular purpose. I told everyone. I told my closest confidant, Mr. Augustine, a retired schoolteacher and the wisest man I know. He smiled his gentle, knowing smile. "This is a blessing, Veronique," he said. "A true blessing." My old seamstress hands found their rhythm again. I spent months knitting intricate baby blankets from the softest yarn I could find, each stitch a prayer. I went to the market and bought well-loved copies of St. Lucian children's storybooks, filled with tales of Anansi the spider and the magic of the islands. I wanted my grandchild to know where they came from. Most importantly, I went to the small safe box where I kept my important papers and took out the deed to the plot of land just up the hill from my house. It was a beautiful piece of land with 2 mature mango trees and a view of the sea that could break your heart. It was the land my late husband, Samuel, had always dreamed we would give to our child, a place for them to build a family home, to put down roots. In my mind, this land was no longer just a promise. It was my grandchild's birthright. Then came the invitation. "Mummy, you have to come for the birth," Chloe had said, her voice full of the warmth I so desperately craved. "I need you here. David and I will buy the ticket, of course. Our gift to you." A week later, the manipulation began. She called in a panic. "Mummy, the payment for the ticket didn't go through for some reason." The airline said there was an issue with David's card, and the price will triple if we don't buy it now. Can you please just pay for it from your end? I have the money right here. I will give it to you in cash the second you land. I promise. The old, familiar warning bells should have rung. But they were silenced by the roar of my own excitement. The thought of holding my first grandchild, of being there for my daughter, eclipsed all caution. I saw the finish line, the culmination of my life's purpose, and I ran towards it, heedless of the red flags. I went back to the bank and, with a hand that trembled slightly, I withdrew the last of my significant savings, the money for my roof, and I bought the expensive, non-refundable one-way ticket to Atlanta. I was not just buying a plane ticket, I was buying a dream. I told myself I was simply solving a temporary problem, that my daughter was good for her word. I chose to believe. It was a choice that would cost me everything. The journey from St. Lucia to Atlanta was a pilgrimage of hope. The small Hawanora International Airport was abuzz with the familiar, melodic rhythm of my people, friends and family wishing me a safe journey, their faces beaming with shared excitement. "Bring back pictures of that baby, Veronique," they called out. My suitcase was heavy, not with my own things but with the future. It was packed with the soft, hand-knitted blankets, the colorful storybooks, and a tiny hand-sewn outfit I had made from the softest white cotton, embroidered with little yellow hummingbirds. My heart felt light, buoyant, with an anticipation so powerful it was almost a physical presence beside me. During the long flight, I clutched my purse and inside it my phone. I reread the last text message I had received from Chloe that morning. It was short, non-committal, but at the time it felt like everything. "Can't wait to see you. Safe flight, Mummy." I must have read those 7 words 100 times, each time infusing them with the love and excitement she had failed to put there herself. I imagined her on the other end, her belly round and full, preparing a room for me, preparing for the baby, her heart as full as mine. Landing at Hartsfield-Jackson was like stepping onto another planet. The sheer scale of it, the rush of thousands of people from every corner of the world, the cool, recycled air, it was all a shock to my island senses. But the overwhelming feeling was one of exhilaration. I was here. I had made it. I navigated the long corridors and the customs lines with a determined smile, my heavy suitcase trailing behind me like a faithful dog. I emerged into the arrivals hall, a vast cavern of glass and steel, and my eyes scanned the crowd of waiting faces, searching for the one that mattered most. I expected to see her immediately, her pregnant belly a beacon. But she wasn't there. My first thought was simple, logical. The traffic in Atlanta is terrible. I had heard stories about it. I found a spot to stand, my suitcase at my feet, and I waited, my eyes fixed on the sliding glass doors, my heart pounding a happy, expectant rhythm. An hour passed. The crowd from my flight thinned out, replaced by a new wave of arrivals. The initial excitement began to be pricked by small needles of anxiety. I told myself a new story. They must be at a doctor's appointment. A last-minute checkup. She'll call any minute. I checked my phone. No new messages. No missed calls. The battery was getting low. 2 hours passed. The anxiety was no longer a needle. It was a slow, coiling serpent in my stomach. I shifted my weight from one tired foot to the other. My smile felt frozen on my face. A new narrative formed, this one tinged with a desperate hope. Maybe the baby is coming. Maybe she went into labor this morning and they rushed to the hospital. That's why they haven't called. They're in the middle of it all. The thought sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, a mix of fear and elation. But a colder, more rational voice whispered in the back of my mind, but why wouldn't David call? Why wouldn't someone send a message? 3 hours. The serpent of anxiety was now a dragon, breathing a cold fire of dread. The bustling airport, once a symbol of exciting arrival, now felt like a vast, lonely wilderness. I was an island of stillness in a river of motion, invisible to the laughing families and embracing lovers who flowed around me. My legs ached. My spirit ached more. I approached the airport information desk, my voice trembling as I spoke to the young woman behind the counter. "Excuse me, miss," I began, my St. Lucian accent feeling thick and foreign in my own mouth. "Is there any way to page a passenger? My daughter, she was supposed to meet me." The woman gave me a polite, pitying smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said. "We don't have a paging system for the public." Her polite, unhelpful response was another closed door, Another confirmation of my utter helplessness. I found a row of payphones, a relic from another time, and used the last of my American coins to call Chloe's number, the number I knew by heart. I listened to the rings, each one a hammer blow to my hope. Then the click. Voicemail. Hi, you've reached Chloe. Leave a message. I called David. The same result. The wall of silence was absolute. As I walked away from the payphones, my shoulders slumped in defeat. A janitor pushing a large cleaning cart stopped near me. He was a man about my age, his face kind and etched with the lines of a long life. You all right, ma'am? He asked, his voice a gentle southern drawl. You've been standing here a mighty long time. I looked at him, this stranger, and the dam of my composure broke. A single tear traced a path down my cheek. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. He reached into his lunchbox and pulled out a bottle of water. Here, he said, pressing it into my hand. You look like you could use this. His simple act of kindness, the first I had been shown in this cold, enormous place, was devastating. It was a stark, painful contrast to the calculated cruelty of my own flesh and blood. It made me feel more profoundly alone than ever before. He had seen me. Why couldn't my own daughter? The night I spent in the Hartsfield-Jackson airport was the longest night of my life. The initial adrenaline of my arrival had long since faded, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and a grief so profound it felt like a physical illness. I found a row of connected plastic chairs in a deserted corner of the terminal, a brightly lit, sterile purgatory. I tried to sleep, but sleep would not come. The glaring fluorescent lights hummed a merciless, sleepless tune. The announcements, echoing through the cavernous space, spoke of destinations I would never see, of happy journeys that were not mine. Every time a security guard walked by, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor, a hot wave of shame would wash over me. I tried to make myself smaller, to look like a passenger waiting for a delayed flight, not a grandmother who had been abandoned by her own child. I was a respectable woman, a churchgoer, a pillar of my small community in St. Lucia. Now I was a vagrant in a foreign land, a problem to be managed, an object of pity and suspicion. The handmade baby blankets in my suitcase felt like stones, each one a heavy reminder of my foolish, misplaced hope. Dawn, when it finally arrived, brought no relief. The rising sun, filtering weakly through the massive terminal windows, only illuminated the cold, hard reality of my situation. They were not coming. This was not a mistake. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate, calculated act of abandonment. The invitation, the story about the ticket, it had all been a lie, another scheme to get money from the foolish old woman on the island. The thought was so cruel, so monstrous that my mind struggled to accept it. But the silence from my phone, the empty space where my daughter should have been, was undeniable proof. My new reality was stark and terrifying. I was stranded, thousands of miles from home, with less than $50 American in my purse. My savings were gone, spent on the ticket to this nightmare. My heart, which had been so full of love and anticipation, was now a hollow, aching void. There was only one thing to do. I had to go home. But how? The ticket I had bought was one way, a testament to my naive belief that I would be staying for months to welcome my grandchild. With a heavy heart, I gathered my belongings and left the airport, stepping out into the cool Atlanta morning. The city felt vast and indifferent. I used a precious few dollars to take a bus into the city, my destination a place I never in my life dreamed I would have to visit. A pawn shop. I found one on a gritty downtown street, its windows barred, its neon sign flickering weakly in the daylight. The shame I felt walking through that door was so intense it was almost suffocating. The man behind the counter was bored and indifferent, his eyes barely registering my existence. He looked at me, a respectable-looking elderly woman in her Sunday travel clothes, and saw only another mark, another story of desperation. My hands trembled as I reached for the thin gold chain around my neck. On it hung my late husband Samuel's wedding band. I had worn it every day since he passed, a constant, comforting weight against my skin. It was my connection to him, to our life together, to the love that had been the bedrock of my world. Taking it off felt like a betrayal, like a second death. I placed the ring on the grimy countertop. The pawnbroker picked it up, weighed it in his hand and squinted at it through a small eyepiece. He didn't see the 40 years of faithful marriage it represented. He didn't see the hands of the good, strong man who had worn it. He saw only its weight in gold. "I'll give you 100 for it," he mumbled, his voice flat. $100. For a lifetime of love. Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I could not afford to cry. I also took off the gold necklace my own mother had given me for my 16th birthday, another piece of my history, and added it to the pile. He offered another 50. I took the money, the crumpled bills feeling dirty in my hand. I had been forced to sell my past to escape the future my daughter had destroyed. The flight back to St. Lucia was the mirror image of my hopeful arrival. I was no longer filled with joy. I was hollowed out by shame. I sat in a cramped middle seat, my body aching, my spirit broken. I tried to hide my face from the other passengers, convinced they could see my failure, my humiliation written on my skin. When the plane finally landed back at the small Hawanora airport, the familiar, warm, humid air felt like a suffocating blanket. Mr. Augustine was there. He had promised to check the flight arrivals just in case. He saw me before I saw him, his face breaking into a wide, joyous smile. "Veronique," he called out, rushing forward. "You're back early. How is the baby? Is Chloe well?" His smile faltered and died as he got closer, as he saw my face, my empty hands, the devastation in my eyes. He stopped, his expression shifting from joy to confusion, then to a horrified disbelief. "Veronique," he whispered, his voice full of a sudden dread. "What happened? Where is your luggage? Where is the baby?" I looked at my dear friend, my rock, and the dam finally broke. I collapsed into his arms and wept, the silent, shameful tears of the airport giving way to great, racking sobs of a woman whose heart had been shattered into a million pieces by her own flesh and blood. Returning to my small community in Castries was an agony. News travels fast on an island, and the story of my hopeful departure had been the talk of the neighborhood. My friends from church had thrown me a small bon voyage party, pressing little gifts for the baby into my hands and hugging me with shared excitement. Now I had to face them not as a proud new grandmother, but as a woman who had been publicly and profoundly shamed. The pity in their eyes was almost harder to bear than the cruelty of my own daughter. They were kind, of course. They brought me food, they sat with me in my quiet house, they murmured words of comfort. But their kindness was a constant reminder of my humiliation. I felt like a failure, a fool who had been duped by the one person in the world she should have been able to trust. It was Mr. Augustine's anger that saved me. He was not pitiful, he was furious. His righteous indignation on my behalf was a shield against my own encroaching despair. "This is not your shame, Veronique," he would say, his voice a low rumble of fury as we sat on my veranda. "This is her shame. You are a good woman, a good mother. She is the one who is broken, not you." His anger gave my own grief a new shape. It began to transform from a soft, suffocating sadness into a hard, cold, slow-burning rage. The day after my return, I knew what I had to do. I took a long, solitary walk up the hill behind my house, to the plot of land that had been the centerpiece of my dreams for Chloe and her child. The sun was warm on my back, the air thick with the scent of frangipani and salt. The land was even more beautiful than I remembered. The 2 mango trees Samuel had planted as saplings were now tall and proud, their branches heavy with young fruit. The view of the sea, a breathtaking panorama of turquoise and sapphire, was unchanged. I stood there for a long time looking out at the water. For years, when I looked at this land, I had seen a future that belonged to Chloe. I saw the house she would build. I heard the laughter of my grandchild playing under the mango trees. Now looking at it, I saw nothing. The future I had imagined had been a mirage. The land was just land. It owed Chloe nothing. The promise I had attached to it had been made to a daughter who no longer existed. In that moment, standing on that hill, I felt a profound shift within me. The land was not her birthright to squander. It was my legacy to control. That night, fueled by a new, cold resolve, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the old, dusty ledger I used to keep for my seamstress business, along with a shoebox filled with old bank records and slips from the money transfer office. It was time for an accounting. The process was a quiet, meticulous torture. I sat at my kitchen table late into the night, the only light coming from a single bulb overhead, the only sound the chirping of the night insects. I went through years of slips and transfers, my own handwriting a testament to a decade of one-sided sacrifice. Each line item was a memory, a small, sharp stab to the heart. There was the $500 for car trouble, that had clearly gone to a weekend trip I later saw pictures of online. There was the $1,000 for a dental emergency that coincided with a music festival she had attended. There was the endless stream of smaller amounts for rent, for bills, for groceries. Each one had been sent with love, with a mother's worry, and each one had been received with a casual, thoughtless entitlement. I wrote it all down in the ledger, the columns neat and orderly, a stark contrast to the chaos of my emotions. When I was finished hours later, I added up the total. The final sum was staggering. It was a number that represented years of my hard work, the new roof I had never gotten, the small trips I had never taken, the comfortable retirement I had denied myself. It was the quantifiable price of my love and Chloe's deception. I closed the ledger. The grief was still there, but now it had a name and a number. It was a debt. And a debt, I knew, was something that could be settled. The woman who woke up the next morning was not the same one who had returned from Atlanta, broken and ashamed. The grief had been burned away in the crucible of my late-night accounting, leaving behind a woman made of steel and resolve. My actions over the next few weeks were not emotional or impulsive. They were deliberate, dignified, and executed with the precision of a seamstress cutting a final pattern. My first call was to a real estate agent Mr. Augustine had recommended, a reputable woman known for her efficiency. I told her I wanted to sell the plot of land on the hill. She came to see it that afternoon. Her eyes widened as she took in the panoramic view of the sea. "Mrs. Laurent," she said, her voice filled with professional admiration, "this is a prime piece of property. It will not be on the market for long." He was right. Within 2 weeks, she brought me an excellent offer from a Canadian couple looking to build a retirement home. I signed the papers without a moment's hesitation. The sale was final. The first part of my reclamation was complete. My next stop was the office of Mrs. Baptiste, the town notary. She was an elder, a woman in her 70s with a regal bearing and a reputation for unimpeachable integrity. She was a pillar of our community, and her validation meant everything. I sat in her cool, quiet office and explained that I needed to draft a new will. "I am leaving my home and all my remaining assets to my goddaughter, Therese," I said, my voice clear and steady. Mrs. Baptiste looked at me over the top of her spectacles, her expression betraying nothing. She had known me for 40 years. She had known Chloe as a little girl. She understood, without me having to say a word, the magnitude of what I was doing. She simply gave me a quiet, affirming nod. "As you wish, Veronique," she said. The decision to name Therese was simple. My goddaughter, a young nurse with a family of her own, had been the one to check in on me every other day since my return. She brought me groceries, sat with me on the veranda, and listened without judgment. She had shown me the quiet, consistent love of a daughter, while my own daughter had shown me only contempt. Naming her my heir was not a punishment for Chloe. It was a reward for Therese. It was an act of replacing a daughter who had failed with one who had been faithful. As I signed the new will, with Mrs. Baptiste as my witness, I felt a profound sense of peace. My legacy was now secure, entrusted to hands that were worthy of it. The final step was the letter. I knew I owed Chloe no explanation, but I owed myself a final, definitive act of closure. I went to the post office and bought a large, sturdy envelope for registered mail. Inside, I placed no angry, tear-stained letter, no emotional appeal. I enclosed only 3 documents. The first was a certified copy of the official land sale agreement, the legal document showing that the property she had considered her birthright was gone forever, its value now sitting safely in my bank account. The second was the ledger. I had neatly torn out the pages detailing every dollar I had ever sent her, a meticulous accounting of her long and costly deception. The third was a simple one-line note, handwritten on a plain piece of paper. It was the coldest, most powerful sentence I had ever written. "Consider this your full and final inheritance. We are now even." I sealed the envelope and sent it on its long journey to Atlanta. I felt no anger, no sadness, only a quiet, resolute finality. I had settled my accounts. I had reclaimed my life. And I had finally, after a lifetime of sacrifice, chosen myself. The registered letter landed in Atlanta like a silent bomb. For 2 weeks after I sent it, there was nothing. I imagined the envelope arriving, Chloe signing for it with casual indifference, the confusion turning to shock and then to dawning horror as she examined the contents. I had closed the door on our relationship, and now I waited to hear if she would try to break it down. The first attempt came in the form of a phone call. I was in my garden, my hands deep in the rich soil, when my phone rang. I saw her name on the screen and my heart gave a painful lurch, a ghost of the old maternal instinct. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A few minutes later, the machine blinked. I went inside and pressed play. Chloe's voice was a jumble of confusion and disbelief. Mummy? Mummy, what is this? I got a letter. It must be a mistake. The land, someone made a mistake. Please call me. I deleted the message. The next day, another voicemail. This time, the confusion had been replaced by a sharp, indignant anger. How could you sell my land? She shrieked, her voice thin and shrill. My land. Daddy wanted me to have that land. He had no right. You have to fix this. Call me back right now. I deleted the message. The final voicemail came a week later. It was late at night. Her voice was no longer angry. It was pathetic. It was the tearful, pleading voice of the little girl who had always known how to get what she wanted from her foolish mother. Mummy, please call me, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened at the airport. I was so sick. Please, Mummy, I need you. I stood there in the quiet of my kitchen and listened to the ghost of my daughter, and for the first time I felt nothing. The well of my love, the one she had drawn from so carelessly for so long, had finally run dry. I deleted the message and unplugged the answering machine. The conversation was over. My life began to bloom again, nurtured by the resources I had reclaimed. With the money from the land sale, I finally hired local workers to put a new roof on my house, the sound of their hammering a joyful, constructive rhythm. I had them build a beautiful new veranda that wrapped around the front of the house, big enough for all my friends. I painted the house a fresh, vibrant shade of coral. It was no longer a house of waiting. It was a house of living. I took the trip I had always dreamed of. I booked a spot on a small island hopper boat with 3 of my friends from my church sewing circle. We spent a week visiting Martinique and Dominica, laughing until our sides ached, drinking rum punch and feeling the warm sun on our faces. I had spent my life sending money away to a place I had never seen. Now I was spending it on the beauty of my own Caribbean home. The final scene of my old life and the first of my new one took place on my new veranda. I hosted a large celebratory luncheon for my true family, my friends, my church community, my dear Mr. Augustine and my goddaughter Therese. The air was filled with laughter and the scent of grilled fish and my homemade coconut bread. I stood up and raised a glass of sorrel. I didn't speak of betrayal or pain. I spoke of gratitude. I want to thank you all, I said, my voice clear and strong, for reminding me of the importance of tending your own garden. For too long I was watering a plant in soil that would not grow. Now I choose to invest in the beautiful garden right here in front of me. I turned to Therese, my new heir, and handed her a small gift-wrapped box. Inside was not a grand jewel but a simple savings bond. For your little one, I said, smiling. To start her own future. A new legacy. She hugged me, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude. As I looked out at the faces of the people who truly loved me, gathered on the veranda of the home I had made beautiful for myself, I felt a sense of peace so profound it settled into my very bones. I had been stranded in an airport, an ocean away from home, a ghost in my own life. But I had found my way back. I had reclaimed my past, secured my present, and planted the seeds for a future that was finally all my own. I was free.